This is the Leadership Podcast, and we study leaders. This is episode 499, featuring Joe Pine, co-founder of Strategic Horizons, LLP. Thank you for joining us today. This is Jim Vassilopoulos, founder of Rafty Advisors, and this is the Leadership Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Jan Rutherford here, founder of Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for making us a part of your day as we study leaders. And as Jim said, episode 499, which means we have 498 other episodes in our catalog at theleadershippodcast.com. And this episode, like so many others, is proudly sponsored by Darley, trusted by warfighters and firefighters since 1908. Darley's dedicated to equipping our military and first responders with the essential tools they need for mission success, from fuel and firefighting pumps to drones and tactical solutions. Discover more about this incredible company and the people who serve our nation's heroes at darley.com. Darley, you serve others, we serve you.
Yeah, and today we are super happy and fortunate to welcome a guest who's been on the show before. His name is Joe Pine. He was on episode 4 and June 27th, 2016. So kind of a way back. And I just want to kind of refresh everyone's memory. If you haven't listened to that episode, I heard Joe speak 25 years ago or so at an IBM conference. And he was talking about his book at the time, The Experience Economy. And that book and the ideas in that book transformed our business in ways I couldn't imagine. It transformed how we delivered our service and graduated into delivering an experience as well as a service. Super influential. It's so influential that he was one of the very few authors in my life where I kind of said, like, I need to meet this guy. I need to talk to this guy. I need to get to know him. And through the years, I got to know Joe a little better. We have spoken about a bunch of things. I've attended a bunch of his conferences in years past, and it's just a great honor to have him on the show again. Before I welcome Joe to the show, I just want to make sure everyone knows he's an internationally acclaimed author, speaker, and management advisor. He does work all over the world. His many books include The Experience Economy, which I mentioned, Infinite Possibility, Authenticity, Mass Customization, and new in 2026, The Transformation Economy. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim, and Jan as well. It's a pleasure being here with you again, only 495 episodes later.
Yeah, and it's just, as soon as, I think it's funny, as we saw that you had the new book coming out, one, I ordered it, and two, Jan and I communicated almost instantly with one another. It's just like, hey, let's have Joe back on the show. So, hey, welcome back. We're glad to have you. Something new that we've been asking our guests for quite a while now, but probably not in episode 4, was what's something that's not in the public bio?
Well, I won't mention I'm a big golf player because you already know that, given we played golf together. I will mention I moved around a lot as a kid, so my favorite teams are the Yankees, Lakers, and Packers. Hopefully that doesn't turn off, too many of your guests, the Red Sox, Vikings, Golden State fans out there.
Well, yes, I am a Bears fan. I know you're wearing Packers yellow today.
Wasn't that a nice game yesterday, Tim?
It was a good game. I know the Bears lost, but we finally showed up. We have a team that competes, and that kind of makes me proud. So I'm looking forward to a rematch in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So I want to get into the meat of this because I think you are one of the most innovative, interesting thinkers. And it's not because you think about technologies or the future. You think about business models and you think about things that are really interesting. So you talk about in your book the progression of value, which you actually talked about in The Experience Economy, which is, at the very lowest level, we extract commodities, a level higher, we make goods, a level higher than that, we deliver services, and then we stage experiences behind that, which is really, innovative thinking and has proven to be not just foresight on your part, but like proven true through the last 20 years or so, to be very, very much, in play. Now you're talking about guiding transformations, which is the next level above staging experiences. am curious, like, why is the world ready for this now? What is going on that makes the world ready for transformations beyond experiences?
Well, it's funny, I put in the preface to the book, which I call a preparation for reasons that'll probably become clear later, that people have been asking for 25 years, when am I going to write this book? Because you'll remember that the last two chapters of the experience economy were on transformations. And to some degree, I thought that the first 8 chapters were just a Trojan horse to get you to read the last chapter, where the really fun stuff begins with transformations. And whenever somebody asked me about it, I'd say that I can't write it yet because, one, I don't know enough about it, and two, the world isn't ready for it. And so, just directly to your question, those two things have changed. I've learned a lot over the last 25 years for a lot of things. I've learned, especially over the last 2 years of actual writing, in particular, thanks to my Substack, where I actually wrote the book on Substack. And the world is ready for it. I mean, it's still in many places a big scary term to say transformation, as opposed to just change in that. But Jim Gilmore and I first wrote The Experience Economy. I can still remember for 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years having to argue with people that this was happening. And I'd have to just practice responses when people object the idea of experiences as a distinct economic offering or an economy based off experiences. And then that just sort of like melted away. And I never have to argue with people. You just say it and they get it. And that started to happen with the transformation economy. I've talked about it for 25 years. Whenever I smell with a client, this is an opportunity for them, as opposed to, I'll use the term, mere experiences, although it was very still avant-garde for a lot of industries and so forth. Then I would talk about it, and you'd get those arguments then, and that started to go away the last 3, 4, 5 years for transformation. So they talk about it and people get it and they understand it as that next stage beyond experiences.
Yeah. Are we ready just because we've been marinating in these concepts? Or is it maybe just because we live in a time where we just, don't have as many wants
Right.
or needs as many as we do have?
We have far more wants than we used to.
Yes.
We just
Yeah,
don't
we do.
have as many needs as we used to. I
Yeah.
think that is the case. I mean, both experiences and transformations have always been around. Right? They're not new economic offerings, just newly identified. And so, you go back in times past when you've always had concerts and plays, for example, with experiences. And we've always had transformations because people have always changed, right? You have life transforming experiences. That's where the idea originally came from, is that phrase of life changing experiences. And what is that? But what's increasingly different, first with experiences and now with transformations, is that we increasingly pay other people to do them for us. Or not, well, you can't do a transformation for us. You can just guide us and help us in doing it. We have to transform ourselves. But so we increasingly understand how difficult it is to fully change. We also have an environment where, like, I'll mention one particular down the plate transformation industry, right? Anything have to do with fitness, right? Fitness centers and, inside what I call health and well-being as a sphere of transformation. And the reason is, well, because like up till like 50 years ago, work made us fit. We didn't need to transform to be fit because our work generally, in most occupations, made us fit. And now that that's not the case, we have this new need. I don't know if you mentioned Maslow's hierarchy, but people often bring that up as something that says, well, yes, we have covered most of the lower levels, and so we are up at that higher levels of self-actualization being the top one, which is basically a transformation, right? You actualize who you think you should be, who you should become, or my phrase, who you're meant to be, is what people are trying to achieve. And again, it's hard to do all that. And so we look for other companies to help us achieve those aspirations that we have.
So, Joe, the 4 spheres of transformation, you've got health, wealth, wisdom, meaning. We know that people seek experiences, but most people do resist change. And so, when I'm hearing transformation, I'm hearing break bad habits, create new habits. What is it that we've got to do differently as we look at this idea of transformation?
Well, it does spread across those 4 spheres, and again, whatever the sphere it is, they're difficult, right? They're difficult to be able to do, and often they're difficult because we don't commit to them, and we do resist change. And it's funny when when I started writing the book, and in the first book, Experience Accounting on it, it's sort of always viewed like you have an aspiration, right? Well, I never thought, well, where do aspirations come from? Until
Right.
I started writing this book. And a lot of it comes from things that we do want to resist, right? So we have slowly gained weight over years, right? To go back to the fitness example, and it's difficult to get that weight off. And we resist doing so because we like to eat and have enjoyment. And we've got all these habits, like you said, which is one big level of transformation that people need help with. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of apps to help you change your habits. But yet it's difficult. So one of the key things when you see that on resistance is that you really fully need to make a commitment. And as part of what I call this transformation journey that I modeled after the hero's journey that's in the book, that you need to have a commitment in there, and you need it for yourself as well as for the company. What I call a transformation guider needs to get that commitment from you. Otherwise, the chances of success are very low. You may go along for a while, but until you really make a commitment to this is who you want to become, then the chance that you actually achieve that aspiration is very small. So from both your side as what I call the aspirant, the one who has an aspiration and wants to transform, and from the transformation guider side, you need to come together to that commitment in order to resist that resistance to change.
Yeah. Tell me if you think, again, I'm just trying to boil it down to, the tenets of human behavior. If we make a commitment, I mean, any of us can make a commitment, but what it requires really to see it through is discipline. And part of that discipline is sacrifice. In other words, if we're going to focus on something and be disciplined about it, we're going to have to say no to a bunch of stuff. I mean, as simple as that, it boils down to really having the discipline to see a commitment through.
And one of the things the transformation guider needs to do is to encourage that discipline, to help create that discipline, even to enforce that discipline. If you look at the difference between going to fitness center, which is basically treating you as a guest of an experience as opposed to an aspirant of a transformation, right? You pay your monthly fee, charging for time. That's what experienced agents do, is they charge for time. And they don't much care whether you lose any weight or not, or whether you get more fit. Tragedy, but they think their best customers is those who make a New Year's resolution to become more fit, sign up, come once, and never show up again. And they get their money for a year, right? Well, no, those are customers who you failed as a business, right? You flat out failed those customers because you didn't help them commit. You didn't help them instill the discipline. Contrast that with a personal trainer, where it's not that personal trainers just give you more attention. It's exactly what you said, Jan, is that they instill discipline. They do what it takes to make sure that you actually do your exercises on the days you're supposed to do the exercise, for how long you do the reps you're supposed to do. And that's the number one difference between what they do and your normal, person at a fitness center.
Yeah. And I think that's a good example. And I kind of want to use that because I want to kind of drive this into kind of the rubber hits the road business part of it. We talk about the progression of value all the way from commodities through services to experiences and transformations. But we talked about, let's say, pricing, because a large component of pricing is value. Like, how am I deriving value out of this exchange of anything? And so if I'm going to guide you on along a transformation, ideally, and people have been trying to do this for years very unsuccessfully, like pay for outcomes. So, let's just say I would do something on like, hey, let me be your personal trainer. You'll pay me for how many pounds you lose, or, you're going to, be my, in the financial services industry, some firms do like pay based on how much money you help them make, or a percentage of how much money you help them make. But largely it's really hard to get people to pay on, let's say, those discrete results, like how much weight you've lost or how much you've increased your lung capacity or something like that as an athlete. Give us your thoughts on how this is going to evolve and what we need to be thinking about as business people as we try and lean into the transformation economy, but how to set pricing in the transformation economy.
Yeah, and eventually what you're saying, Jim, is exactly where it needs to go to, because as a business, you are what you charge for. If you charge for undifferentiated stuff, you're in the commodities business. If you charge for tangible things, you're in the goods business. If you charge for the activity your people perform, then you're in the service business. And you're in the experience business, as I mentioned, if and only if you charge for time, right? Mission fee, membership fee, but why? Because that's what people value, is they value the time that they spend with you, that you stage in a way that's going to engage them and create a memory. So with transformations, what you have to charge for is the demonstrated outcomes that your customers achieve, right? And simply, that's what they're looking for as an outcome. And inputs, therefore, don't matter, right? You think about consulting companies where you do see many consulting companies that do charge for outcomes in some way, whether it's, take some stock, that goes up, we make more money, whether it's explicit measurement or whether it's a guarantee of some sort, versus the service model of time and materials, right? And so whatever services they do, whatever activities they do, they effectively don't matter unless the customer gets out of it the outcome that they want. Interestingly, on the day we're recording this, my Substack post for this week is specifically on outcomes-based pricing, right? And B2B environments, like looking at consulting companies and others as well. It's simply a matter of eventually you have to align what you charge for with what your customers value, right? Let me say it again. Eventually you have to align what you charge for with what your customers value. What often happens in these switches is shifts in the new economies is that companies give away the next level of value in order to better sell what they have today, right? Since you mentioned IBM, right? When I worked for IBM, we had this phrase, IBM means service. And what that meant is that we would give away whatever services you want, as long as you bought our hardware goods with what we called internally our normal exorbitant profit margin. And that's how we made money. But eventually, guess what? We've realized customers value the services more. And that's where all the real value in the industry moved to this day. And so you got to the point where IBM would actually buy your hardware from you, right, that you had purchased from them previously or from other vendors, and bundle them up and say, now you pay us based on how well we manage your data center, right? Because it's that focused on the outcome. So you always got to remember it's outcome, not inputs. And until you make your income dependent on your customer's outcome, you're never really going to do everything it takes to overcome the resistance that Jan talked about, to align what you're charging for with what your customers value, to really get them to fully change, make those commitments, get that discipline, and so forth. So yeah, and I know of hundreds of companies that do that, but I don't know of thousands of companies that do that. And it should be tens of thousands of companies, right, in the transformation to do that. But that's where we're going. That's where it's shifting. That's where more and more it is happening, every month, every year, that more companies are recognizing the true value is in outcomes-based pricing. Doesn't mean you have to charge all of it. You still charge some at the service level, which most consulting companies do, some at the experience level, but have that transformation level there, have that outcome-based pricing in what you're doing, because then the chances they actually transform go way up, and your profitability will in fact go way up as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I think as you go up, let's say the value chain, you enable potentially higher profit margins. And I think, because I can stage an experience and get far more than delivering the service. And, all the way through, I'm just adding value so I can charge more. I think what's interesting to me, and, this is part question, part commentary, and I've got a client right now that is doing some IT work, and they are almost giving it away, but getting paid on the results of the flow through the transactions through that work. And it is quite aggressive. What I've noticed with this is there's kind of a shifting of risk as you go up the value chain. Whereas if I'm buying a commodity, it's like I can measure, know exactly what I'm getting. There's no risk.
Right.
This is the quality of iron ore that I'm buying or coal. As I go up and get a product, I can get a warranty on that. I've got some safety, and the risk is, it's not as risky. the further I go up in a service, I might have some service level agreements, or I might have some contracts that guarantee I get things done, but there's more risk for the buyer. There's more risk of non-payment by the vendor. And experience is, more trust factor. Like, is this going to be good? I might have a reputation for delivering great service or delivering a great experience, but there's risk on both sides a little bit. But it seems like the riskiest area where
Yes.
there's no guarantee of something, and the risk actually does shift in many ways, I think, to the provider, is at this highest level.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that, like risk and pricing, and actually the amount that the provider of that transformation might have to take as risk, and how that factors into pricing as well.
Yeah, and I think very insightful in how you present that, Jim. You're exactly right. I talk in the book about 4 ways of charging for outcomes. And sort of one of the most prevalent one and the easiest one to do is, in fact, a transformation guarantee. Here's the fixed amount that we're going to charge, but then we'll come back under it, right? If we don't meet the service, you talk about service level agreements. There's a lot of people working on experience level agreements. We need transformation level agreements as well as part of this. And so you guarantee that usually that final portion of the total bill. And the irony is, of course, is that you may be offering a transformation guarantee, but that's exactly what you can't actually do. You can't actually guarantee a transformation, right? As we talked about, a transformation actually happens inside of people or inside of companies for a B2B transformation. And you cannot guarantee that in that normal way of saying the sentence at all. However, the best way to make it happen is to offer a guarantee, to offer that outcomes-based pricing, again, because it changes the equation of both sides. And it's also a catalytic mechanism for the company, for the guider, to figure out when things don't work with certain customers, with their aspirants, what could we have done differently? And okay, that catalyzes us to rethink our operations, rethink our processes, develop and innovate again so that we get closer and closer so the next person doesn't have that problem and so forth. And so it's the way of getting better and better at it, in which case the number of transformation guarantees you're gonna have to pay out, go down and down over time because you're using that as a mechanism to improve what you're doing.
Yeah. I think this is so fascinating. And, for anyone who's listening to this with an ear of potential skepticism, what I would argue is that I am starting to see this trend. I am starting to see this. And much like Joe suggested earlier, when he first brought out the concept of the experience economy, people were like, "Wow," and pushing back on it. And then it, really came true in full force. So this is an interesting trend. I think that you're getting ahead of this. People are going to just pay attention, keep your ears to the rail, because I think this is going to be something that's of significance down the road. Something else that I want to make sure we talk about quickly before I pass the baton over to Jan is our sponsor, Darley. They're a wonderful company. They're a family-owned business based in the Midwest. They've been a trusted partner of the U.S. military and first responders for over a century. They sell mission-critical defense equipment, innovative firefighting solutions, and they ensure our heroes are always equipped for success. You can learn more about them at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Joe, you say transformations are essentially an identity change or evolution. And as executive coaches, Jim and I both deal with executives and a lot of military veterans that are in transition. And, what I found myself saying to them is what you're looking for is wisdom that helps you translate who you are, not just what you've done. And we know it's challenging, but is there a best way to engage people in this sort of transformation proactively?
Yes, and I talk in the book about, this is actually the original Experience Tribe book, about 3 phases of transformation: diagnosis, experiences, because we only ever change for experiences. That's why it's right built atop the experience economy and easier to shift to in that way. And then follow through. And diagnosis is generically where you can work with customers and find out, who they are, what do they want to become, and then design the set of experiences it takes to be able to do that. But often customers don't know what they want and so forth. You got to
Right.
help figure that out with them. But one of the things I discovered in the writing of the book is that there are such things as invitational transformations. And this may be what you're talking about, Jan.
Yeah.
It's basically what Jim Gilmore and I long called marketing experiences that do the job of marketing by generating demand for them. You think about flagship locations like the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin, the Heineken Experience in Amsterdam, the World of Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and so forth, where you're paying an admission fee, right? So they understand they're in the business. These are all profit-making things that generate, huge amount of demand. Why? Because people they identify with, part of their identity becomes that company. I go to the Guinness Storehouse. Maybe I taste Guinness for the first time as I'm a tourist in the area from another country, or I really get to understand about how it's made and all the processes goes into it, and now it's got new meaning for me, and I realize, hey, I really love this drink. You're going to use these words that I identify with Guinness, but it becomes part of your identity. And what they're doing is they're inviting you to transform. They're inviting you to become a beer drinker first, a Guinness drinker, or a Heineken drinker second, right? And so that can be an element of identity that comes in. We can do that with other things that have much more import, obviously, than what we drink. I'm thinking particularly one example I use, because I got this term invitational transformations from Bob Rogers, who's the head of BRC Imagination Arts. And BRC created the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield, Missouri. And they specifically went into it of, we don't just want an experience. Right? We want it to be something that transforms kids in particular into loving history, into Lincoln aficionados like my daughter is, that want to learn more about Lincoln through life and so forth, of understanding, civil rights and things like that, all those associated with it. So one of the measures they put in place, right, there's a little bit of an outcome, right, is most companies just, in most of those places, measure how much do people buy in the gift shop, right? And that's, it's a key measurement. How do we affect that measurement? What they care is, like, we don't care what tchotchkes they buy. We want to know if they buy books, right? Literally, because that means they want to learn more, right? If we instilled something, they want to learn more. And that was the key measurement that they looked at, is how many books are people buying?
Yeah.
If not enough, how can we do that to get people to buy more books?
Yeah.
And so you can think that with your the military people that you work with as well. Is there a way that we can invite them to transform? Well, you think about AA meetings, right? Which is that the first AA meeting is an invitation, right? You believe me, I mean, most people are not committed. There may be some, but most people are not committed to those. And it's an invitation to see what it's about, see if this might be for you, see if we can draw something out of you, if you recognize that, hey, there is something I can change. I know there are military counseling sessions. I don't think there's a generic word for it, but with therapists, group therapy and soul therapy. In the same way, that initial group therapy to come in, maybe I think I've got PTSD, or maybe I got other issues, and you invite them to come in to these group sessions, and then you say, okay, it's just something you want to change. Hopefully you get that commitment. They're committing to come all the time, and that transformation can then happen with the counseling that you and Jim and others do so well.
Yeah, and I'm thinking kind of, generically what we see, regardless of transition, is, and again, looking for your help here a little bit, is people are looking for, one, they don't know what they want. Number two, they really want to figure out what a good life is. And we know it's lived in the service of others. What we also know is a lot of people basically transact. They give time and they get money. They don't really look at it as, I get to serve. I get to help people. I get to make other people's lives better. So how would you apply what you've done to that? Getting people to transform from looking at things as transactions to looking at a higher purpose.
Yeah.
Again,
Specifically, sounds like you're talking about before they go into the military.
I'm
as
talking
opposed to
about
us.
executive. I'm talking about everybody.
Right.
Because
Yep.
I've yet to meet many people that aren't in transition in some way, shape, or form,
Right.
and
Right,
figuring out what's next.
Right. That transition you're talking about is a liminal, right, space and time between who they were and what they're going to become. And they've lost a little bit of the identity that they had before, and they know they're looking for something and they don't know what it is. So yes, so that invitational way of getting them to come about is a good way to do it. One of the things I talk about in the book that at the beginning of the writing was this little small thing and came to be this huge thing. And in fact, if I started over from scratch, I might even put this first in the book before talking about transformations. And that is to understand human flourishing, right? And I think this is what you're getting at. And human flourishing, I define as the extent to which people are who they're meant to be, right? That's what human flourishing is. The leaves undescribed who the who is that should be meaning you to be, but it's, who you're meant to be. And one of the greatest ways to do that is what you're talking about, is serving others, right? Whether it's in the military, whether it's servant leadership, whether it's understanding that I will flourish more the more I help other people flourish more. And that includes your family and your friends. It includes your colleagues and your employees. It includes your customers and your communities that you're in. So I go so far as to say that fostering human flourishing is the raison d'etre of business, period. Right? That's why business exists, is to help people flourish.
Right.
And whatever economic level you're at, whatever socioeconomic level you're at, and whatever economic value you're selling, nobody buys that from you unless they think it's going to better their lives in some way, right? The purchase of this offering is going to better my life. They're not using this term, but that's what's going on, to the extent that I value that more than the money I have in my purse or my wallet or my account. And all the ills of capitalism that people talk about, and there are a lot, even though it's the greatest system ever invented, and people don't understand that. They should really understand how much more abundance we have today because of capitalism. But the ills are there because people don't recognize that they're there to foster human flourishing. Right? So they do things to specifically make their products addicting. I was reading an article this morning about social media being addicting. You think about all the products that are more directly addicting. And they work to make that happen more, instead of saying, no, that is not going to help people flourish. And may it mean you don't make as much money on the short term? Sure. But you're addicting people. Just understand that, right? And face it, put it in your face, put that on your mirror. Is this who you want to be? When you were growing up, is this what your mom wanted for you? I want you to grow up to be somebody who addicts people to products? I mean, come on. They need to go into transition and recover from that. And so if you have that in mind, and that's part of my mission now with the remaining years I have on this earth, is to get people to understand, get businesses to understand that you're here to foster human flourishing. Profits are the measure of how well you help people flourish. Again, not just customers, but employees, communities, society. Profits are never the end. They're always the measurement by which you achieve the ends of human flourishing.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. There's an area, I could go 10 miles deeper on that issue alone, but I want to dig into one other area that has been intriguing me, and that is kind of expectations. When I take a look at, let's say, expectation management, which is an important part of doing business well, at a commodity level, it's, quality products, it's almost quality. With services, expectation management is a little, more advanced because it's, a little more sophisticated. And with experiences, it's even more sophisticated because I'm trying to maybe exceed expectations every time. And so, I'm staging an experience where I just want to wow people. Expectations with transformation. I can see how that is really hard because, think of all the people right now that are going to be going out and buying treadmills and ellipticals this time of year and gym memberships because oh my gosh, I'm going to have the beach body. And then, then they don't. And maybe it's the fault of these companies that aren't helping people fulfill their potential. But talk to us about how we might want to think about expectation management a little more differently as we lean into transformations.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about this before, Jim, and I love coming up with things I haven't thought about before. So thank you for the instigation. But what occurs to me is the number one thing is to turn the expectations setting around. It's not that I want you to have expectations of what I'm going to do for you. I want you to have expectations for what you're going to become, what you're going to do for yourself. I'm the guide, right? I want to help you do that. You're the one that is actually changing, right? So your only expectation of me is how I can help you do that. The key expectation is, what is your aspiration? It's who do you want to become? And so that changes the conversation, I think, in terms of that. But you still have, like, the expectations, you never want to overpromise and underdeliver. There are cases where you can't deliver. And often, if not, I would say usually at the very least, it's not your fault. It's the customer's fault, right? It's because they decommit, they do get in that resistance. Life happens too. It's just a matter of, life happens. Like, I want to get back to be a single digit handicap golfer. And, I vary between 10.1 and 11.8. And I don't know if it's ever going to happen where for like 6 months straight, I'm in the single digits because life happens. I don't have that much time to practice and so forth. So I don't know if a golf instructor will want to take me on a transformation basis because of that, because I can't do what they're going to want me to do all the time. So then that happens in different situations for every person. So it's getting them to understand that the expectations is on you, is who you want to become, and then how we're going to help you go about doing that. And so, yeah, I may be able to over deliver, I may be able to under deliver, but if you also then make that you commit to that, if you commit to that expectation, then I'm going to commit to do everything I can to help you achieve that expectation, achieve that aspiration, right? That's the commitment I make. And so trust comes into it, relationships come into it, past performance comes into it. But it's something I think that you can then work on to be able to get them to see that you're the right company to be able to work with them on this particular aspiration that they have.
Yeah. I think, what I really kind of am intrigued about this, and, once again, I'm not sure there's a question or a comment, but we talk about a world where things are getting automated, and, I look at it and I say, I think what we're describing here requires so much more talent and so much more skill and so much more human skills that, we can relate to with people that, this is a way to kind of hedge against, the technology that, we fear might be taking our jobs. Like, going in this direction only makes the human connection and the ability to kind of like have that relationship with someone so much more important. And I just, you know, whether we go there because it's a smart place to go because it's more profitable, or it's the next evolution of value, I think it's also an area where, we can kind of defend that this can only be done by someone that's human and with great skill.
Right, right. There is certainly a level of AI that can be used. It actually will be very good at counseling and therapy, right? When it learns not to become a psychopath and encourage people to kill themselves, where it's at today. My belief is that we really should view AI as IA, and not as artificial intelligence, but as intelligent augmentation, and that it exists to augment the skills and abilities that people have and help us do our jobs better and do new jobs that we couldn't do before, rather than automate us, which is what most people think of when they think of digital technology, much less AI. But there's a lot of value it can provide in transformations, but it's a very human business from the aspirant standpoint. Even if you're talking to B2B transformation, the business is made up of individual human beings, and you're going to have to work on transforming each one of those in order to get the business to fully transform. So there's going to be a lot of human activity, in that forever, because we are human.
Yeah. Joe, kind of switching gears on you a little bit. In the past, you always had co-authors, often, with some of your work.
All about my first book. My first book I did myself. Hopefully this isn't my last book, so I don't want to bookend this,
There you go.
But
No pun intended.
yeah.
So your thinking, with this was, with Substack readers, really.
Yep.
So Jim and I, as authors ourselves, are kind of curious how you went about, how you approach this and develop this versus how you've written books in the past.
Yeah, so I'll mention that I got on Substack in particular because of what are known as the category pirates, specifically Eddie Yoon and Christopher Lochhead, if you know them at all. But they're just great thinkers, and they've got a Substack that just is tremendous to be a part of. And they talked in their Substack, and in particular a book called Snow Leopard that I got and read, about how to get people to pay you to write, basically, and use that as part of the income stream. And so I thought about that, and what I recognize is that, so yeah, that'd be nice, but what it really does for me is two other things. One is it's a catalyst. Again, it's like people are paying me to write. I got to write, right? That's a commitment I make, that if they pay me, I got to come out with posts. And that was the big deal. So it forced me to go into what I call writing mode. I don't know if you do this, where it's like the first thing I think about when I get up, and I try and do that and save all the other stuff for later. And it allowed me to do that. And then the second reason, it was to make the book better, to get feedback while I was writing it, which I've never really done before, other than with clients where I'm testing out new ideas in a presentation form or a workshop form. And the money that you make off it is sort of the gravy on top of that. And so those were very, very successful. It was definitely a catalyst. To this day, I'm still writing every week. I just did one Saturday, actually, that I created a new category for, which is a new idea that sort of like would have been in the book if I hadn't finished with the book already. And it related to invitational transformations. And there's also cases where they made the book better, right? I got a lot of feedback. I have Zoom sessions with my paid subscribers. I've got thousands of regular subscriptions and hundreds of paid subscribers. And I have a Zoom session, although not all call them, of course, every 6 weeks or so, get feedback that way. And when I was actually writing the book in the early days, I'd have feedback forums. Tell me what you think. Give me comments on it. The biggest thing, there were several I could point to, but the biggest thing was basically had two different frameworks, two different 2x2s for types of transformation. And I literally put them out there. So here's one, here's the other. Tell me which ones you like. What do you like? What do you don't like? And one of them, a little over half the people preferred over the other one. And the other one, a quarter of the people preferred, and then most didn't care. And I said, well, okay, that's not very positive results. I wanted to be obvious, like which one of these is really good. And it turned out neither of them. And one specific person, actually another podcaster, right, who's a subscriber, and I did a podcast for him. And he was like, I don't know if he used the word meh or not, but that was his reaction. Like, yeah, I read both of those and meh, whatever words he used to describe that. So I said, all right, I got to go back to the drawing board. And so I did. And I've got behind my bookcases on the other side of the screen here, I've got a conference room / cigar lounge. And one of the walls is pure whiteboard wall that my wife painted on for me. Right. And so when I need to think, I go in there and I draw and I make lists and I do things and so forth. And so I started going there this is like a Friday afternoon. I was doing all afternoon. And then I also called Kevin Dully, who I'll mention is, and developing my thoughts in this book has been, as helpful almost as a co-author. He's my consigliere, I tell him. For over a decade, he's been drawing and illustrating all my ideas in my slides. And then over the last few years in particular, it's like I have an idea, I tell him, and he asks a lot of questions, and he makes the idea better as he goes about, figuring out and illustrating it, which has worked out very, very well. So he helped me in particular with this framework of just being the sounding board. Here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm talking about, and so forth, and came up with some good things. And Saturday went back at some more, developed some more 2x2s, developed some ideas. I was spending 6 hours on this, but it's not really gelling together yet. And then finally on Sunday morning, in the middle of a sermon at church, that's why I say that this framework is providence, right? I've listened to this framework, the church sermon. I'm paying attention, I really am. And all of a sudden, it's in my mind goes, boom, this is the model. I mean, just completely full formed in almost an instant. And I go, yes. Right? Now, if you don't believe in God, you're going to say, well, all that work I'd done to prepare me, I could have been in the shower when this happened, right? That's probably true. But But I say it's Providence that did it. And it's this Delta model that I came up with. It has different levels to it, different types of transformations embedded inside of it. And so it's it's one of the core frameworks in the book. And I never would have come up with that without Substack. So it's just the biggest effects they had, but they had smaller effects, throughout and making things better.
Let me ask you real quick, just when it comes to AI, did you take the manuscript and throw it into AI and say,
I did not.
I was going to ask you if you threw it in and said, don't rewrite it, but where do you think is strong?
Right.
So you didn't do that. You didn't.
I have a friend who did, though, and told me the results of some things. Right.
Did you incorporate those?
No, well, yeah, I don't recall actually in that particular case, but he did throw some stuff in and send me some feedback on it. And I may have, I just don't recall. And actually, it's published with Harvard Business Review Press. And they made me sign this form on how I used AI during it.
Yeah.
And there's actually one thing I did, which is actually, I did it by proxy as well. Use Fathom Video to be able to record, a lot of my discussions with people. And I specifically used it when I was interviewing them to be an example in the book. And there was one that made it as an example in the book. And I basically told Fathom Video, give me a 400-word summary of what this company is doing, right? And it gave me a very good summary. It outlined all the key things. I changed it a lot to get it to sound like me, to add some details and so forth. But the basic structure, the basic ideas were there. And so I know that works. And the friend that I was doing it by proxy as well, the friend that helped me do that, or that did send some things in and send them to me, was Stan Hustad, a guy I've known since high school. Not because he was a fellow student, but because he was actually one of my teachers in high school and my chess coach. And so he would actually interview people. I hired him to interview people, some of whom made it in the book. And he would use AI also then. He'd write it up and use AI to do it. And so some of the things I got from them, was sort of like had some AI in the background as well.
Interesting.
It is something I'm going to use more and more, particularly around like developing ideas for a particular industry. If I'm giving a talk and want to know, like, what could I do for, one of the strangest ones in experience economy was pest control. I remember, and coming up with ideas for pest control was a little harder. But some of those that I use AI, I do what I really want to use it for. And I'll use it for creating articles on an industry in the same way. Okay, we run all this, give me 1,200 words that I could do on this industry, but I'll always edit it. I can't help it. I am a writer, right? But I do plan on creating an AI of myself. Right? I want an AI bot. And as part of the offerings they'll give, there'll be a level. I don't know if it'll be part of a higher level at Substack or directly on our site, but we'll give access to people to my AI bot and let them ask me questions. Let them use it that way. Have it read everything I've done. So that is in my plans to be able to do. And also then, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. As I get up in years, there may be a time when I can't do this anymore, or I could get hit by a bus at any point. Then there'd be something that people could still access. It sounds hubristic now that I say it out loud, but maybe people still want to talk to me after I'm dead. We'll see.
Yeah.
If so, I hope you guys interview me, or interview my bot. Would you remind me your 1,927th episode? You come back and interview my bot.
Yeah. If we're still doing it, or maybe the virtual Jim and Jan are doing it, we will assure you that will happen. And so, Joe, while we still have the real Joe, not virtual Joe, do you have any closing thoughts for our listeners here?
2 thoughts. First thought is understand what business you're really in, right? You got 5 genres of economic offerings: commodities, goods, services, experiences, and transformations. And you need to determine what business you are really in. And I'll say in particular that, you mentioned, Jan, the spheres of transformation: health and well-being, wealth and prosperity, knowledge and wisdom, purpose and meaning, right? If you find yourself in there, guess what? You got a tremendous transformation opportunity. Guess what? Almost every business can find themselves in there somewhere, right? That's one of the key things, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a decision you need to make to shift up this progression of economic value beyond goods and services to experiences first, and then to transformations. And then secondly, there's one other framework, the concept human flourishing came with so much bigger. There's one framework that became so much bigger, which is simply, if you understand this framework and you know how to stage experiences already, this is like the number one thing you can do. You almost don't have to do anything else. There's a lot of stuff you should do, but if you do this alone, you'll be transformative, at least in the majority of cases. And it's what I call encapsulation. So encapsulation is where you have preparation, which is why I called my preface preparation of this book, before the experience. You help them imagine what the experience will be, help them think about their own lives, if there's anything they might want to change in there, etc. Then you have the experience, and then you have reflection, right? And so you encapsulate an experience inside of preparation, reflection. And reflection is now to look back. What were the highlights that you experienced? Were there things that sparked new thoughts in you? Were there things that sparked maybe a new aspiration that you might want to change? Is there something along those lines? And then finally, you have integration, which is integrating that change into your life, right? So after that reflection, hopefully that's a great place to make a commitment. And then, do I truly want to become that? And then you can help them do that through the integration of the follow through of the experience.
That's awesome. Well, again, it's crazy that you were on episode 4, Joe, way back when
Hey,
Jim
I
and
took
I
a chance
started.
on you. Now that you're, big and successful, thanks for coming back to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Again, we really appreciate having you on the show. And for our audience, that's all we have for you this week. You can connect with Joe by looking at our show notes. So make sure to visit us at theleadershippodcast.com. And remember, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday's logic. Transformation begins with a change in mindset. Peter Drucker.
Outstanding. That's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Podcast. To listen to more shows or to access the books and content discussed on this show, be sure to visit theleadershippodcast.com. The material in this podcast is copyright by Rafti Advisors and Self-Reliant Leadership and must have written approval before commercial application.